So this is how you want to clean your car. There's the sponges.
Yeah.
It's going to be £50, and here's a documentation of how to get a really shiny, nice car.
And that's going to take you like at least 2 hours to read.
But we give you the buckets, and there's all the hose pipes. There's all the things for you just there. Yeah, off you go. Hello, welcome to Cloud Unplugged. I'm Jon Shanks.
And I'm Jay Keshur.
And today we are going to be talking about cloud platform engineering.
Wow, that sounds different.
Yeah, platform engineering obviously is a big term, but very generic. And we want to kind of niche in a bit on cloud platform engineering and what it means, and why it's important to differentiate, just to obviously save time and money and effort for the business overall.
And the thing that you like the most, cognitive load. So
cognitive load.
Yeah, so
what's cognitive load? What is cognitive load, Joe?
Because obviously, like the term platform can be so ambiguous,
Massively
right?
ambiguous. Yeah.
And the fact that platform engineering doesn't really mean anything because platform is so ambiguous. So
Yeah,
I was like,
lots
what
of
am I
things are
engineering?
platforms.
Am I engineering like a bridge, which is a platform? Bridge engineers.
Tube station
tube station platforms.
YouTube,
yeah,
which is a platform for content.
Any of these things. So cloud platform engineering at least gives it a little bit more context. And then platform engineering is becoming more of a known term in the industry, but it reduces the cognitive load. See what I did there?
Wow. You've been practicing.
By adding cloud platform engineering.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the platform engineering is like we were saying, even if we to get back to our industry, the DevOpsy, Dorometric-y stuff we've mentioned before, in principle, you could still engineer, you could literally engineer anything just for the sake of it under that terminology. There's no real context as to what you're specifically trying to engineer as a platform. Like, what is the platform specifically you're engineering? And that's why I think us attaching to, if you've gone to a cloud and there's lots of services there in the cloud, you could argue, and I know you don't agree with this, that the cloud is the platform. You're like, no, it's not.
It's just the service.
It's the service. But
service
there's lots
you can use. Yeah, exactly.
However you want to look at it, how do we augment the workflow for teams to take advantage of the cloud that we've just gone to and that we're paying money for, but also because it costs money to be there, how do you also make sure that you're engineering to manage that cost properly for teams so it doesn't kind of exponentially grow? And how do you manage the security properly for those teams so that you're reducing the risk when you are engineering to get to the cloud properly? And I think that in itself, I think somebody was telling me today that there's been, just Amazon alone, every year for the last 6 years, there has been 40 services released.
Yeah, that's crazy.
40 services
crazy.
Released.
And
what are they all?
And 1,600 features of existing services.
Yeah, and there was like so many 1,000 APIs
exactly.
endpoints as well to it all.
Nuts.
I mean, that's bewildering, isn't it, really?
To some degree, it's pretty amazing that that you could niche in on so many things and just
not niche in
or whatever. But
when you've got 40 per year,
yeah, exactly. Just do it all. But you're there's obviously a lot of demand for all of these solutions, and how you can put in the end compute, networking, storage, all of these things together to create an outcome for an organization, which is exactly what a platform is in the end, right? It's making sure that you can configure all of the things together to provide enough of a solution. You being an expert in those things creates enough of a solution for someone else to not have to be an expert in those things. Like cloud is exactly that. They're going to rack the infrastructure. They're going to do the physical layer. They'll think about the virtualization, all of that kind of stuff, the security, both physically and of the thing that they're providing. And then, that's the platform, I guess, that they built. And then you're building another platform on top of that to then, again, abstract your developers away from the knowledge that you have or the way that you put that stuff together to get the actual outcome.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, because the developers aren't there to get like bewildered like we are of all those services and what they all mean, and however many millions of parameters that you can pass to a specific service, and then having to go and read the docs of each service to then work out what's relevant to me in my app. I mean, that's not a good use of people's time if you're there to write business code and business logic.
Also, it would be really, really hard. Imagine if every organization needed you to, know how to manage infrastructure, know how to like be an operating system admin, Linux or Windows, and all of that kind of stuff, and then write code, and then know the business function. You'd never hire anyone.
You'd never hire anyone.
Honestly, or they'd be ridiculously expensive.
Yeah, they would. And there probably are people like that who are ridiculously
full
expensive.
Stack engineers.
Who are probably like, can you guys stop talking about me like this? Because we need to get, the demand up for my skills.
Or that one person now has like lots, a massive...
Oh yeah, they're probably like posting underneath saying I'm available.
Exactly.
Hey, I'm available.
It's me. Hi.
Yeah, exactly. Putting the hands up.
I'm a full stack everything engineer.
Yeah, I know it all.
I build bridges too.
Yeah. But yeah, so I guess the assumptions are that we're kind of making on why you would want to do cloud platform engineering is developers probably don't care about a lot of things to do with the cloud, apart from things that pertain to driving their outcome, because they're measured obviously against getting something live in the end and getting it into customers' hands or being able to demo the things in front of people, right? And them trying to spend a load of time working with whatever this in-betweeny platform to the cloud platform, if you want to call the cloud the platform, or if you're just saying the cloud's a service and you're going to build a platform, however that platform's configured matters in the end, right? Because at the moment, it's just a bunch of services, and those services exist in a cloud account or a subscription or a project or whatever cloud vendor you're in. But something needs to organize all of that right from the beginning.
Well, pick the right services to use. Make sure, obviously, they're set up in the right way.
The architectural principles around the cloud to begin with, like how do you streamline that for a project? How do you streamline that for the applications? How do you make sure non-production and production are separated automatically in this platform? Like, it isn't just about, hey, a dev needs to get a thing, because you could say, I mean, we've spoken about all these things on the podcast before, but you could share. I suppose if you're small enough, it might make sense. But if you're an enterprise, you really wouldn't profess to share things, right? Because of the security risk, and the data's different, and the operational requirements might be different. The SLAs might be different for the app, right? So being able to construct a workflow that matches the delivery standards, I guess, and security standards around delivery is probably more what I mean for the cloud, is also important.
So let me see if I understood you correctly. So what you're saying, because that wasn't easy to understand.
Me correctly, Jay. What are you talking about?
Yes. Anyway, so what you're basically saying is trying to put the things together to make it really, really easy for a developer, so that they don't have to worry about the principles. They're taken care of in the design. The platform that you've created is just makes it super easy for you to get an outcome and align to the principles that you have, either best practice in the industry in general or your organization specifically.
Yeah, because the cloud's unopinionated. This is the thing. The cloud's unopinionated about how you should construct all of these independent things. However, it then does have a load of documentation about how you should construct all of these things.
Really?
That's like the well-architected frameworks and all this other stuff, right? So, but it hasn't formed an opinion. Really, it's like, here's some suggestions on some opinions.
Well, they're pillars, aren't they? So
they're pillars you can be guided by. I know you love this. Is it an operating model?
This is actually not. This is a well-architected framework.
Oh, right,
so.
okay, whoa. Okay, sorry, my mistake.
Know your big documentation bits. No, so.
But one feeds into the other, I guess.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
So basically, there's things that you need to design for, and that's what's like well architected: security, resilience, performance, all of those things, right? But they just basically tell you a bunch of like opinions or things that you should take into account, but not necessarily
considerations. Almost,
exactly. Considerations.
Just a lot of reading.
Really.
It's like a thesis of stuff that you've got to go and read
and become an expert in,
and then become an expert in.
The thing that you've now created, even though you're supposed to like abstract away, the hard bits to make it really easy for someone to consume you, because you've also got this like massive documentation everywhere that has evolved over time, that someone now needs to be an expert of, just to understand what you're trying to say, and then how that then is reflective in the platform that you're trying to build on their platform.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
And then also, can you just pay us loads of money for that, please? You're like, wow, okay, thanks for that.
Be great if someone just had an opinion of
this is how you want to clean your car. There's the sponges. It's going to be £50, and here's a documentation of how to get a really shiny, nice car.
And that's going to take you like at least 2 hours to read.
But we give you the buckets, and that's all. There's all the hose pipes. There's all the things for you just there.
And maybe you want to test this on other cars before you clean yours.
So, you probably want to test that it is going to get that clean first before you tell everyone else that you can clean cars.
Oh, crazy!
It is a crazy world.
Such a weird industry.
Sometimes. Yeah, it is. But saying that, I guess because they're solving specific individual problems per service, and everything's disaggregated in some ways, you're there to get the Lego bricks and build whatever it is you're trying to build out of these Lego bricks. And that's where the buck stops a little bit in their shared responsibility model, which then means you could do that each time per project. Very arduous, probably likely to be reinvention of the wheel going on across different pockets. Or you find a common way, like a platform of like, how do I do this programmatically? How do I do it repeatably for every single project? And where do I standardize on all of this stuff in one place? So I can guarantee that every piece of the cloud delivery has met expectations of the business
and is consistent
and repeatable and validated and tested, and I can make changes in one place
and easy to operate.
And easy to operate and easy to get visibility on. And that's why you do cloud platform engineering, to find a platform or create a platform or buy a platform or find tools or whatever it is you're going to do to build something like that, right?
That makes sense, yeah. So cloud platform engineering, just put some stuff together on cloud. Just stitch it all together, add all these Lego bricks on top of each other, and eventually you get a house. Yeah. And hopefully that house is easy to maintain, because that's what that team is designed to do. But don't you think, though, the term...
No. Next question.
Not a loaded question at all. Don't you think, though? So, like, platform engineering as a term is like it exists now, but the fact that the business just wants the outcome. They just want, something that reduces the time to value for the thing that reduces the time to market for the thing that they're building, reduces the cost, the security, increases the security, reduces the risk, all of those things. But now there's these terms like platform engineering or cloud platform engineering that they're attached to the work rather than the outcome. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So you're not necessarily measuring that you can like take that, the amount of money that you spent on that team or that function internally is actually providing the ROI, because it's across everything, and you took a lot of time to potentially build that team or whatever, rather than trying to pick something off the shelf that exists. Maybe there aren't that many solutions off the shelf that exist in this space.
Yeah. I mean, it's not. I suppose, though, like there will always be some level of engineering needed. Yeah, sure. So I think it's what you're saying is it's maybe promoting, because it's a little bit of a generic bucket. It's potentially promoting really large teams to solve any problem of the business, of which might not be justified necessarily, because there may already be a solution to it. And a lot of times, we're all a bit like this, including myself. If you've got an idea, you want that idea to be original, and then when you find out that it wasn't original,
10 other people
you're kind of trying to find the one thing that makes it not the same, right? So you're like, that isn't quite the same as my idea because it doesn't do this. Therefore, let's write a brand new thing because of that one thing that didn't exist.
Spend £5 million on this team because of that one problem, one thing that makes it unique. Yeah,
exactly. And I've been culpable to that because you're only human, and obviously, you know, you it's natural to a point. And I guess there is a danger of that behavior becoming quite endemic in businesses. I think there was also, this is a little bit off a tangent, which we always do. We need to try and stay on topic sometimes. But there was a post about someone going back on-prem because obviously they've got petabytes of data, and actually then they've got application workloads and other things, and really just the cost wasn't justified. And I think they were saying that they could save 1.5 million a year or something by just buying the hardware and other things. I mean, I'm plagiarizing it probably incorrectly.
I think I know the thing you're talking about.
The way they costed it wasn't at a project level. So what I found interesting was you've costed it as an entirety, right? Of like X and Y. We're spending X over here of X infrastructure, not correlated to any project. And we're now spending Y over here in terms of infrastructure as a whole, and it costs this much. And you're like, but you haven't worked out what projects are paying for what within all of that first to work out the cost per project. And then actually what it took from a staffing per project to actually get the real cost per project on delivery. What you've done is look at it operationally and infrastructure, and it might still end up cheaper, which is fine. I just found the cost model slightly wrong and tilted to the wrong place, because you need to look at it as how much resource capacity did it even take to deliver that project or set of projects on top of the cloud, on top of all the other things.
Just total cost of ownership, really right?
So actual full end-to-end cost, because you can't just, a business won't look at it necessarily just from that lens, because there's all costs from lots of places, so you do need to kind of correlate it properly.
I actually don't think I have seen this article. So they just did a comparison on the infrastructure rather than the people that they need to manage that infrastructure.
I think they might have said they had, I mean, I don't know the ins and outs, so I don't want to be unfair to too much, but they've definitely done the costs and they did stats. It's not like I'm saying there wasn't some legitimacy to it. They probably already have people. I guess what you couldn't really see from a modeling perspective is the relationship between the people and the cloud and the infrastructure and everything else in context to a project. And maybe there'd be even cheaper hosting mechanisms for certain projects, in which case you going on-prem or even the cloud, that specific cloud is in Amazon or whatever has cost you money, may not even be the most cost-effective place for that project. So you haven't really looked at it through the. You've had a bias.
Yes,
it's been biased already before you've been objective, and it's like objectivity would have meant
you look at it in many lenses
per project, and then worked out where would the cheapest place to host that project. What was the overheads on going to that place?
I think that's but that's also just one. So whenever you're doing any of this type of like comparison, you have to do it from more than one lens. What you're kind of suggesting here is just doing it from the project lens. But I think there's value in doing it from both, because you'll understand different things, right? So like, let's say that total infrastructure cost and the operational cost and all that kind of stuff, they've done maybe a total cost of ownership there. But if you did it the other way, which I think I definitely agree on, like the project scenario as well, and like per project, if you weren't doing, say, a centralized platform, whether that platform was going to be on-prem or in cloud, what's the time to market? What am I driving for the organization? Is it consistency across the board? Is it, can each project be in its own? What does that mean to the developers? What does it mean to their skill sets? All of that stuff. So you have to do it from both, like top to bottom and bottom to top. And then it's really hard, obviously, and it will take a long time.
It would take quite a long time.
But then you'll get to a better understanding, really, of the decision or the impact of the decision that you're about to make.
Yeah, so it's strange. But again, that's now engineering another platform, because they'll have to, and that might be the right thing in the end for the business, and it could have ended up cheaper and maybe that calculation was enough, who knows, but it felt instinctively felt a little bit off to me, just because I was like, well, now, but then I guess it boiled down to the chargeback models of, if there even is a chargeback model, because if it's all flat and there is no pockets of money, and it's just that there's just, just line items coming out from how you operate as a business, and you haven't sought to attach some cost back to a cost center, right, or a line of business to say, well, or a P&L, right? So like that's the profit and loss area, that's profit and loss area, that's profit and loss area, and actually I need to make sure that the P&Ls of all these areas, getting into financial stuff, but it's gonna make it functional from a CFO's perspective on those decisions back to the business. So actually it's easier to correlate, rather than we're spending loads of money on cloud and we're going to go on prem, and you're like, well, financials, so CFO surely would have had a say, maybe, or should have had a say in that as well.
100%. But the other thing, I guess, that one of the other difficulties of cloud really is the different charging models with every service. And so like because everything is consumption based, that's the world that we live in now, right?
Then it's also a little bit free.
Yeah, exactly. Just get you hooked on the jug. Get you hooked on the jug. So
yes, there are charges, but right now for you it's free.
You've just got free. Like a guy standing on the corner.
Have a little look.
Like, have some data center.
Exactly.
Do you want some of this data center?
Have a little try, Jay.
Yeah, exactly.
Just have a little taste. It's just fine. It won't cost you anything. Just a little taste, a little try, just a little nibble.
So you get a little bit for free, and then you have all of these different ways of charging for all of these different services, and it's really complex. You might have like 2 or 3 metrics on a service. So let's say it will be this type of machine that has this profile of CPU and RAM or whatever, but then you also have disk attached to that, and on the size of the disk, but maybe the performance of the disk. So already you've got metrics. And then maybe the throughput onto that disk, or throughput of the network. So and that's hard to model for, right? Like you have to really understand it in detail to really.
You also need to understand where you're going to be.
Exactly, which is so
to know how to forecast it, even, because you're not going to really you'll know enough, but not to any sense of accuracy.
Yeah, exactly.
In the end,
and there's obviously choices that you can make architecturally, so that you're minimizing that cost, and obviously that takes a lot of time and expertise. But if you were just looking at it maybe without some of that expertise, then you can quite easily say, well, this goes away if we're on-prem because we own the kit. It's our network, it's our cabling. No one's going to charge me to move something from this side of the rack to this side of the rack. So it's definitely simpler, but I think there's a way to kind of optimize for it if you know what you're doing.
But I guess that is it, isn't it? With the cloud platform engineering link, is those, because even like, if you're going out over the internet and that's going to be more expensive, why don't you lock into our transit gateway? Do you know what I mean? Or our direct connect, because it's going to be cheaper for you, because the traffic's now going through it, and that's going to be much cheaper. It's a much cheaper price point. So, but I mean, those decisions end up mattering to how you will stitch things together, or how you're going to engineer outcomes together, because the more you're driven by the business requirements to maybe reduce cost, right, in relation to offerings that the cloud can give you, because you're not going to not use them necessarily.
What, the service, you mean?
Yeah, as in like, because what they're doing is finding alternative ways, right? And the cloud's providing you with choices, and some of those choices in context to what you're going to be doing makes sense. So if you is like, well, yeah, we should have a direct connect because it is going to be cheap and we've got loads of internal traffic and, blah, blah, blah. Again, then things have to then connect in, right? So then if you're doing platform engineering, you've got to work that through. Now how does everything connect in to some gateway so that all services that are internal can actually see each other and route to each other properly and all these other things? And this is why it can be a complex place, right? Because those are legitimate needs of the business for things to work, and the cloud provider isn't giving you a out-the-box solution. And so you're going to have to come up with something.
Everything's a trade-off. You have to weigh all this stuff up. And
versus running your own everything.
Yeah, exactly.
But you've still got engineering to do.
Yeah.
It's just different engineering.
Different skill sets. And you have to understand like because like you said, Amazon, Azure, they're adding all of these different services every year. How do you know you're keeping up to, the cheapest and best way to operate that thing?
Yeah.
So that's probably why you have an internal team that's always doing that almost R&D and understanding what the best practices in the industry, committing that back to the organization if it aligns with their business objectives and all that stuff, right? So you could definitely...
You would have thought, though, with cost, because now there's 3 cloud providers, the mainstream hyperscalers, plus obviously others that are there. You would have thought the competitive element might have actually adjusted costs, and it really hasn't, has it? It just didn't. It just didn't really... You haven't seen any reduction or redaction of the costs, even with competition increase, which is kind of odd, I think.
There is sort of, though, right? Like
Is there?
they compete on
they don't need to compete from a price because the demand's so high at the moment.
I think they differentiate and then they compete. So they make it hard for you to compare apples to apples.
True.
Right.
That's
so
fair.
like,
so you can't really
exactly
comparatively match and be like, well, that's going to be way cheaper.
100%. An instance type in one cloud provider, for example, will have 6 vCPUs and 16 gig of RAM, and on the other, you won't even have that choice. It will be, or like it will be a different processor or something
the obscure.
like that. Yeah, exactly. So because they differentiate and then differ, and then their pricing models is different across the...
Yeah, so you to even try and work out with what the comparative is.
Exactly.
It's
even different in the different regions of the same cloud provider. So it's so hard to ever get a real good...
But do you think if you didn't differentiate and you could prove you were cheaper, you'd actually gain more traction because you would legitimately look better
only
comparatively?
If the customers made a choice. Because the customers
because you can prove that you are cheaper... more easy, and so can the customer, then you might be more likely to make more money through adoption versus obscuring it. I wonder if they would have done the math modelling on it. This is totally not the podcast episode at all, by the way.
Off topic.
But yeah, it is off topic. But they must have, maybe they've done some research on it to work out whether you'd make more profit on obscuring or more profit from looking more competitive. I don't know.
So this is not quite directly linked, but I think I'll talk about it because it's associated. We're talking about costs. We're talking about what the cloud providers.
You're now trying to find a way to stitch it back to cloud platform engineering.
Not really.
Right, okay.
It's a little bit off topic, right? But the kind of salespeople of cloud providers now, right? The account managers, the customer solutions engineers, whatever they're called. Most of them are now targeted on the savings that they can pass down to a customer rather than how much spend there is on a customer account. So what they have modeled, and the reason that they do that is because they've modeled that the customer is going to spend more in the end.
If they think they're getting value.
If they're getting value. So it's very related to cost. It's very related to the kind of human psychiatry, I guess, of like how people think about them getting value on the thing that they bought and seeing that over time. But the cloud providers, they have all of these data points, and so they absolutely know across all of their customers that this is the thing that is going to get you hooked on the drug, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? In some ways, but also
it's great. I mean, look, it's
not like these things weren't in existence before. There's always been vendors, and vendors have always been out there and coming up with solutions and finding good ways to charge and be pricing. But
people wouldn't be using cloud and all of these things if it didn't mean that their business couldn't, accelerate time to market and be efficient businesses. Like, of course, the value outweighs the cost. That's why all of these businesses, like, imagine how many businesses have, been created over COVID, and it was just a massive entrepreneurial kind of hype, wasn't it, in that time, right?
Yeah.
All of these people working from home, they're not going to rack up a little server in their house. They're going to go and create a business because they have a bunch of time now and use cloud to do it.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have been possible at all.
Definitely.
So,
and I guess that's the thing as well, like to know if there's any element of scaling your business, doing that well, enabling any element to scale well in that complex landscape, you need some people. Let's say you need like an army, like go and get a giant platform engineering team for like a cloud platform engineering team, but you need technologies that enable and people and over it to actually kind of get some conducive outcome over the top, because otherwise the time to value on recognizing it, well, you might be able to do it fast, but it probably wouldn't have been secure.
It might not be well. Yeah, you could.
And the probability of it then being repeatably automated with all of the best practices in there is probably unlikely. And you might not realize how unbest practiced you are until something goes and scans it all, and then someone comes in and tells you and does an audit and like, actually, this is really like there's a lot of malpractice here, and this hasn't been updated, and you've got keys that are static that you're cycling, and it's like so much attention to detail of what you have to do to stay secure as well. Like the policies are overprivileged, and actually you should be doing single sign-on, and why, you've got long-lived credentials over here, and why are you doing this and why are you doing that, and it's like the list is insane of all the things you can do wrong, and as well,
and it grows.
And it grows with each thing that you're consuming.
It grows with each thing you're consuming. It grows even if you kept your thing as it is now, because the cloud vendor is also changing and the best practice is changing. So it means that the best practice policy, your best practice now, today, isn't necessarily going to be the best practice of a year's time. So you need to monitor that thing.
Yeah, because it keeps altering.
Because it keeps altering, right?
And the services keep changing.
The services keep changing. There's new APIs. There's new features of the services that exist and all that kind of stuff. So it's just you can definitely understand why this domain exists and why it's such a niched.
That's why that was important for us to talk about, because I think at the moment there is no, from what I've seen, cloud platform engineering group. And it warrants its own domain, because you're like, it's so vast to then just put it under another vast topic of just all platforms of all the types called platform engineering just doesn't feel right. And I know it's yet another term in the already
we created
insane
a new term. Yes,
I know. Yes. I'm not a fan of it all, but the problem is that it isn't concrete enough, and there's then probably like Amazon cloud platform engineering, right? Or developer
Azure
cloud platform engineering, or an Azure one.
Yeah.
So it's not even that you have to stay there. It probably gets more and more niche as you go down. But I think the clarity of what it is you're really doing is like, this is going to be an Amazon cloud platform engineering or developer cloud platform engineering team. You're like, right, that's really specific. It's for developers.
Bit of a mouthful. Have you spoken to the developer cloud platform engineering team?
You're also going to acronym it. You're also going to acronym it, right? So, but still, I think otherwise you're not sure who it's for or what it's for necessarily, because otherwise it's too generic. So in some ways, you don't have to say it all the time, but you should have it
like go and speak to the cloud platform engineering team. You're not allowed to acronym it. You have to say the whole thing every time. Yeah, exactly.
You're so tired by the time you got to the end of the sentence. You're like, actually, do you know what? Doesn't matter. I've got to go home anyway. I was about to switch my sentence. It's already 5:30. I've only just finished my sentence.
That's why it's just platform engineering. We figured it out. That's why the term doesn't exist.
It's like, it's too long.
Yeah,
don't bother.
No. Don't solve this problem.
Yeah, actually, I was going to come to speak to your team, but by the time someone explained where you were and who you were, it was time for me to go home. Oh dear.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. So. Anyway, I suppose it's not a huge. I mean, we could talk ins and outs of it all, but I think I suppose there's also other things that aren't the cloud that might have to go in it, which is a bit frustrating, because I suppose at some point there's then things that you might not consume every single thing in the cloud because it's the best thing,
like CI or you're kind of probably in the cloud in some way. Like
it could be a cloudy service, but it does start to bridge non-cloudy, traditional cloudy things. But whether they're SaaS and then start kind of theoretically cloud, I don't know.
I wonder if like cloud really is just and public and private cloud, right? It's just like if you were to really dumb it down, is it just infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, and anything that falls into those things are maybe considered cloud?
Yeah, I don't know. The same thing that I don't know, and actually, because what makes me laugh as well with public cloud is when you speak to people, you're like, when public cloud goes on-prem, it's still public cloud. When an on-prem goes to public cloud, it's hybrid.
When on-prem goes to say that
public
again.
Cloud, when a public cloud decides to have Outpost and all these other things, and you ask people, does that mean it's now hybrid? They're like, no, still public.
What?
But when you talk about something like VMware, it's like when an on-prem goes to public cloud, they're like, that's hybrid. And you're like, well, why is it not hybrid when a public cloud goes to private?
That's I didn't think that was true though. I think that
if you ask people like, what is it when is the public cloud still called public cloud? If they're doing on-prem services, or are they now really a hybrid cloud provider? Most people would be like, no, they're still public cloud because that's what they know them by. But then when you reverse it, and you're like, so then when you're private and you start to go to public, you're classified as hybrid. But you're the other way around. You're not. You stay public. So I'm like, how does that work? Then doesn't make sense to me. I'm not saying everybody says that.
Actually, come to think of it, that might actually make sense, right? Because when you are in public cloud and then you have used one of the cloud services like Outposts or whatever to
I suppose they're owned by the cloud vendor.
It's the model. It's the model. So you're still
that makes sense. So you're still using a public cloud.
You're still using it as a service.
Yeah.
You're not.
But you might be still using VMware as a service.
But it's not. That's the point, right? So when you're in your own data center, it's not as a service.
Not a service.
It's just infrastructure.
Yeah, true.
It's
true. Yeah. So that's why. Yeah.
That's why. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I will just clarify that.
There you go.
So it does always stay.
Yeah.
It always stays public cloud until the point that you would own the kit or take some accountability for it.
Yeah. If it's on your books, if it's you've paid capital expenditure, if you need to own it, whatever, then it's yours.
Well, that ruined my facetious little statement, didn't it? My controversial facetious statement, just correcting me.
And on that happy note.
Yeah, exactly.
To
myself, I won't bring anything up anymore. Yeah.
It's okay. You can keep bringing these things up, and I'll just correct
Jay,
you.
What is this?
Exactly.
Cool. Well, that was good.
So cloud platform.
Nothing left to talk about. Do you think? We've just another one solved.
We've defined. I think it's going to be actually really important for people to start aligning them towards cloud platform engineering, right? Because you're now talking about something that's
a bit more specific
that you can kind of niche in on, and the problems that need to be solved in that area, rather than just saying platform engineering or something like that.
I think we did a podcast where we were talking about roles as well, and I think you asked me around like in one of the episodes, going back from memory, you asked me like what you would call if you weren't going to call them DevOps engineers, or these terms because they don't really mean. Because I was saying they don't really mean very much anymore. Controversial again.
Yeah, that was in the State of Puppet. The Puppet report that came out, State of DevOps. They said we tend not to use the word DevOps anymore because it means nothing.
Yeah, but it doesn't really mean anything. That's what I was saying before. Yeah. So then you're saying, what would you call them? And I was like, well, I'd call them by terms that already exist. Like you're a cloud engineer because you're engineering things
in the cloud. Yeah.
So you just call yourself that.
Yeah.
And it's actually quite specific.
Yeah.
Or you're an Amazon cloud engineer if that's all you do and that's your skill set. And there's nothing wrong with that, and it's like it's fine to call yourself what you do. You think is,
but it's still not attached necessarily to the app. So, like, let's say you're.
I know it's not going to be attached to an outcome, but a developer's not called like business logic producer, are they?
Should they be called like GitHub engineer? Do you know what I mean? That's what it's a location, not an outcome, but it's just anything that
there isn't anything else.
That
you could attach to because it's a facilitated role. So I suppose you're facilitating an outcome for someone else, which makes it a harder job. And you might take DevOps principles, but that would just go on your CV, and that you understand the methodologies, not that you are a DevOps, that you just understand how to do it and what it means. And
I think overall, but
I don't know why I just talked about, cloud platform.
Someone needs a coffee. So overall, I think, what you just said makes sense. But when you are... The reason that there's ambiguity, so like the DevOps engineering thing, people were
keep us all in jobs.
But people started like abusing the term. So they would call a DevOps engineer when they were just infrastructure or something like that, right? Didn't have the practice or the mentality or whatever. So then you kind of niche in on a term hope that the industry aligns and uses the term in the same phrase, and when it starts to kind of be used badly, then you have to figure out a new, better term to use to reduce the complexity or reduce the cognitive load on what people like. You shouldn't have to explain what a DevOps engineer does, but every single time now.
What about a cognitive load engineer? Yeah,
what is that?
What you do? Cognitive load engineer. I engineer down. I reduce down the cognitive load. Yeah, I engineer it down.
Maybe that's like a psychologist. Right, we definitely need to end this.
Yeah, we do before it goes more weird. Yes. Cool. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Obviously, you can reach us on Cloud Unplugged on YouTube and Twitter and things like that. So it'd be good for people to
tell us what their thoughts.
Tell us what your thoughts are.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and if you don't agree, even better.
If you don't agree, just don't say
don't tell us.
Just don't have an opinion. Obviously, that's not true, but yeah. Anyway, thanks for listening.
Cheers.
Bye.